Well, we're so happy to have Anne Lilly participate with us today in the Oral History Project for German Village. Anne is a longtime resident of German Village, and I'm excited to hear what she has to say about her history here. I wonder if you might start by telling us a little bit about what brought you to German Village and when that was.
Okay, well, let's see. I moved down here in July of 1961. So that's been a long time, and there have been lots of changes. It was really a broken down neighborhood, but there was a lot of spirit. I was riding around with some friends, and I have a feeling it was the day of the tour, the second tour. And I was needing a place to live because I'd been renting a room with a friend, and I was on sort of an emergency basis, and I decided I really was looking for a place. We drove by 235 East Beck Street, and there was a for rent sign on it. So I don't remember the details of whether Bernie Clough, who was the owner, was there or whether I called or whatever. But anyway, got in touch with him and rented it for $75 a month. The apartment was really fine, except for it had battleship gray walls, which I took care of that later. However, I hadn't been there more than 2 weeks, and there was a vacant lot across the street, which is now the Fetch Park, and a carnival set up. So there I was with the carnival going on in the evenings and people sleeping over there at night, and so but it was okay. I got along with that just fine. But the carnival eventually went away. But the neighborhood was in such a condition that, being a woman from West Virginia, when anybody wanted to come and visit me from West Virginia, I decided it would be better if they didn't see the community in which I was living, because it would probably make me move. So I would meet them somewhere. So now that beautiful park once was a carnival lot.
Wow. You spoke a little bit about the economy at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Can you go into a little bit more detail about what things were like in German Village, economy-wise?
Gee, I don't really know, except that the condition of the buildings, I mean, they were terrible. The people that were living on either side of me were perfectly nice people, but certainly not of any means of any sort. One day I was out cooking on my charcoal grill, and one of the little kids on the other side leaned over the fence and looked at me and with great concern and said, "Don't you have a stove in your house?" So probably had never seen anybody doing charcoal cooking before, which was hard for me to believe, but evidently that was the case.
You also talked about when you first moved here that you were attracted to the spirit of German Village.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share a little bit about what you felt that spirit was like?
Well, there was a kind of excitement. People were buying properties. The Bernie Cloughs, of course the Frank Fetch, Hugh Parsons, Colonel Allen, Bill Shure. And they were buying up the properties and redoing them, and you felt something was going to happen. And then as it continued, we put it together. I mean, we laid the bricks, and we helped each other do that. Yeah, when I moved on to a different property, I was doing a patio, and all of a sudden I had ordered sand and gravel, and little did I know how much sand and gravel they were going to dump into my street, and I had to get it in before the evening. And here came Phil Keents and Marion Warrior and John Surratt and Don Clapham and I don't know who all else with their wheelbarrows, and before you knew it they had all the sand and gravel inside.
Wow.
So, it was just a real community spirit of putting it together. Right.
And you felt very much a part of that.
Oh yes, oh yes, yes. Yeah, right.
So what were some of the roles that you played in that community to become a part of it?
Well, I remember helping Bob Hurry take mortar out of the joints of the house that he was redoing at the corner of Beck and Grant, the northwest corner, and we'd spent a lot of time trying to get the mortar out of the joints so he could have exposed brick on the inside when he finally got it finished. In those early days, for house and garden tours, we moved furniture from each other's house. We didn't have these groups that come in and forgot what they call them.
Staging or something.
Oh, a staging, right, the staging ones. We staged them. We carried furniture from one another's houses. I even remember carrying big pots of water lilies out of my lily pond to put in somebody's lily pond so they would have flowering lilies for the day of the tour. So it was that kind of thing. Yeah.
So you were really very much part of the revitalization.
Oh yeah, right.
And I know you were a member of the commission for a long time.
Right.
Can you just describe briefly what the commission is and how it came about?
Well, the commission is the Architectural Review Board. It was, thanks to Frank Fitch, I think it was established in '64 as a real architectural review all external changes to property, and make recommendations for variances for zoning. And yes, I was on that commission from 1974 to 1988, and that was before we had written guidelines. I have never learned as much in my life as I learned in those 14 years about the way you should do houses, and knowing what I learned, I had made some mistakes in a couple of mine.
Learning from your mistakes, that's a great thing to do.
Right, yeah.
Can you tell the story about how you got involved in the commission in the first place?
I was redoing a house and complaining to Frank Fitch about the commission. I guess that's not unusual. I found out the commission to be complained to him about. And so he talked to me and said, well, Lynn, that's the way it is, and so forth, in his usual fashion. And so it wasn't too much later that I got a phone call from Mayor Moody's office. And they were saying that he would like for me to serve on the German Village Commission, that someone was stepping off the commission and they needed a replacement. So I thought, well, I guess if you're going to complain, you might as well bite the bullet. So that's how I got on it, from complaining. And you don't know what the commission's like until you've served on it.
What are the few of the things that you learned over the years about being on the commission?
Oh, well, I learned a lot about windows and the mistakes that I made. I learned that everything is really a compromise. And you have to deal with people. I mean, after all, these are the houses they're going to live in, or in some cases they're planning to sell them or to rent them, but it's their castle. And so you think about that, but yet you want to stay true to what you feel is the integrity of the architecture in German Village. So
it was a real balancing act, it sounds.
Yes.
One of the things that you just mentioned is that that you were working with people who were either going to live in the houses or they were going to turn them around.
Mm-hmm.
What kinds of changes did you see over the years as regards whether people were actually flipping the houses or whether they were living in them themselves,
right,
doing it to live in themselves?
Well, when I first started on the commission, there was a lot of people still dealing with the investment properties, and doing them. Many of them would live in them for a while and then sell them and move on to another. Some would redo them, rent them. I don't really know because I'm not on the commission, but my sense is that there's probably not as much of that now as there was. I mean, German Village in those early days was really a real estate investment. And those people that bought those early properties, they were interested in saving the area, but they were also interested in the economic benefit from the real estate venture.
And did most of those people, were they absentee or did they actually live here in German Village?
Well, let me think. Of course, Frank Fetch lived here. Bill Schur, I don't think ever lived here. He had several rental properties. Bernie Clough never lived here. I can't remember whether Hugh Parsons did or not. I think there were probably a few that did, but I would say the majority of them in those early days probably did not. Mm-hmm. They had the money to buy up the properties, but didn't choose to live in them.
Well, you said you were on the commission up until 1988.
That's correct. Yeah.
And so how did you see things change over life at your time on the commission?
Well, when I first went on the commission in 74, we were just at that stage where in those early days, if anything people did within reason to make an improvement to the house, you felt like maybe you should approve it. Not always that they did, but it was so run down, so many of them, that just to have improvements meant so much. But about the time that I went on the commission, we were beginning to feel we better clamp down a little bit. We're letting some things happen that shouldn't happen. I mean, we're using the wrong kinds of siding. The whole thing about aluminum siding, and we'd had a board and batten. We were getting away from board and batten. We were being more concerned about being sure you had the right kind of windows. So it began to get fussier and fussier. I shouldn't say fussy. I mean, we were trying to keep the integrity of the village, and that's actually what I think the commission does. And then that, of course, called for the guidelines to be written.
And can you share with us about your involvement with the guidelines?
Well, during my last year on the commission, we were writing the guidelines. I spent a lot of time with a lot of people. Connie Swain actually chaired that committee, and Nancy Ritchie and Jeff Darby and Judy Williams were really the writers, and we spent many meetings with preservationists, with commission members, with society members, with neighbors for input, and then started writing. I mean, Nancy and Jeff and Judy started writing. The rest of us were offering information and then editing as it came out. Spent a lot of time, but it was fun. But never got to use.
because you retired.
Right. So.
Yeah, so that must have been an amazing process to go through.
It was. Yeah. And that happened because of the German Village Foundation, which was the original not-for-profit arm down here, and from the Oktoberfest that they had done, the money was available to do guidelines. It's one of the...
Were you part of the German Village Foundation?
Not an original. I was on it a bit at the very end, but not really. Yeah, Grace Highfield was the one who was really the driving force behind the foundation. She believed very strongly in the foundation, and it was hard, and felt we needed the not-for-profit part. So no, Connie was, and Fred was, and I think Sid Druin. Don't remember who else was on that. Gracie, of course. Yeah.
So you're talking a little bit about the changes in the structure of German Village over the course of your time here.
Mm-hmm.
What other changes have you seen in the structure of German Village over the course of 50 years?
Well, I'm not quite sure what you mean by structure of German Village. Are you talking about, I mean, the changes that I'm most conscious of course, are the architectural ones and what's happened to the difference in the people the difference in the economic level of people that live here. I mean, today, we're not out moving each other's sand and gravel and laying each other's brick. We're having somebody else do it. If you're talking about the society, I was never really particularly active in the society. Certainly helped with house and garden tours and did those things and was a member of the society, but was never on the board. And it's coming around in a different fashion now too, I think. So it's interesting.
Yeah, what do you see happening now that you find interesting?
Well, having been to yesterday's annual meeting and having heard all the things that we've done and how much has been accomplished, it's very impressive. That with the back to the historic preservation and all that. I mean, I think there are lots of exciting things going on there. This being one of them, the oral history, to record what's happened. I know that John and others have done bits and pieces of this along the way. I know there's a lot of written material, but in this day and age, people don't seem to be too interested in written materials. They are more interested in instant gratification, it seems. Which is fine. I'm not being critical.
Instant gratification of laying bricks to make a patio.
That was pretty good, but it wasn't very instant. That was a slow process.
Well, I know that the entrance to 3rd Street, or the 3rd Street entrance to Schiller Park, is maintained by you, the garden there. I just wonder how you got involved in that.
Well, actually, the Highfield Garden is, we did an endowment fund for the Highfield Garden. For a while, I was paying for the maintenance of the Highfield Garden, but we did an endowment fund through the Columbus Foundation. And we did it with through the Columbus Foundation because that's where Gracie would have wanted it. And she was very supportive of the Columbus Foundation. And when it came time to do an endowment fund, that was my choice of where it should be. So that's what we did. So that's really, it was the Highfield Garden that I was doing. And from that, then when we got enough money in the foundation, the interest off that to pay for the gardener to do the Highfield Garden, then the 3rd Street Garden entrance was looking like it could use some help beyond the volunteers, and so I said, why didn't I pay for Paul, the Highfield gardener, to maintain it too?
Okay, and the Highfield Garden is where the umbrella
grill is? Yes, it's one next to the umbrella grill.
And how long is that? And that is in honor of Grace Highfield?
That's correct, right, yeah, right. Right.
And when was that garden developed?
I think it was 92. I sort of forgot. I think it was 92. 90 or 92 when we dedicated it. Yeah, yeah. Along with the Umbrella Girl, and the Umbrella Girl was, then we did the Highfield Garden adjacent to it in her honor.
Yeah, I'm curious that you said that you really haven't been that involved with the society, and that you weren't on the board, but it sounds to me like you've been incredibly involved in German Village over the years.
Oh, in the village, absolutely, but in the operation of the society itself, and that's what I was referring to. Oh, no. Been very involved in the German Village, and certainly supportive of the society, just not on the board. Been on lots of committees, far more than I like to be, actually, or wanted to be, but it was important. Right.
So I know that you must have witnessed a lot of fabulous people with their influence in German Village over the years, and that they were instrumental in making changes. And I wondered if you can sort of think back, like maybe in the 60s and then in the 70s and on through the decades, as to who would you describe as people who were very influential in moving German Village forward?
Well, in the 60s, of course, it was the people that were buying the properties, the ones that I mentioned earlier. Bobby Hurry. Actually, Bobby Hurry moved into the other half of the double that I was in August. I moved in July, and he moved in August. And Bobby he did more than a dozen rehabs. And he was a real craftsman. And so I think he was very influential. He also wrote a column in the German Village. We used to have a newspaper. It came out of the society, I don't know, monthly, quarterly, I don't remember how often, but he used to write a column in there on the preservation. So he was very influential at that point. Then when we got into and again, I'm more into the houses and the society because that's what I was working with. There were the Bob Geeses, the Michael Councils, the Steve Schellenbergers, and probably before that there was the Bill Kramer or Kamer. I mean, people were buying property down here. They loved it. They couldn't get something. They just couldn't let it go. I mean, and loved redoing them. But I remember some of those many times at the commission. And then we became more involved with architects. And so, and then after that, I don't really know very much because when I'm done, I'm done. When I went off the commission, that was I don't think I've been back to a single commission meeting since. I'm not sure. I didn't stick my head in once when I was in the building, but when I'm done, I'm done.
Well, over those 14 years, you must have seen a lot.
I did. I was chair part of that time. We had one person downtown named Martha Trout in the city offices that she was wonderful, but it was a job beyond her. We didn't have a Jody. We didn't have the guidelines. We didn't have the photographs. If you wanted to see before you had to go look, which there's nothing wrong with that. But you have to know the village really well.
So did the commission, did they maintain the house files, or was that part of the...
That's the city. Yeah. I mean, I think there are certainly lots of things down there, but the city has the official records.
Mm-hmm. So I know you just said that when you're done, but I also saw a smile when you were talking about yesterday's annual meeting with the focus on historic preservation, because that really is the heart and soul of the commission. Right.
No, I was very, very pleased with that. And of course, I'm on Parks and Public Spaces Committee, so I have to be happy with that, or they'll get me.
Oh, I suspect you don't do it. So, over the years, I'm sure it seems like you've seen a lot of changes. Can you talk a little bit about what's kept you here and what do you just absolutely love about German Village?
Well, I love the location. I love the sense of community. I am not a social animal, and not a party person particularly. But if I want to party, the parties are there. If I don't want to party, that's okay too. I feel a kind of privacy, yet we live right next to one another, on top of each other, but I don't think anybody cares too much what anybody else is doing next door to them. I feel a sense of security for the same reason, because we live close together. But I think it's the people and the availability to do so many things if you choose to do it.
So there have been a lot of opportunities here for you.
Yes. All right. Yeah. So does that answer your question? Sometimes I ask myself, why have I stayed so long? I've been in 3 houses. I was in the first one I rented for a year. Then I moved to 554 South 6th and was there from 62 to 67. And then I've been in the house I'm in now since 67, so that's a good long time. Somebody needs to go in and redo it again.
With the guidelines and conditions.
There you go. Right. Well, it's a wonderful place to live. There are lots of wonderful people. We've lost lots of wonderful people too, but yeah.
I'm sure.
Right.
Over the years, you've seen many come and go.
Right. Yeah, but it's a great place to live. It's as I said in the newspaper article. I don't think the passion for German Village has changed. The direction may have changed here and there, but the love for the area is still here.
I'm happy to be here with Ann Lilly, and we're here today to follow up with some of the stories that she has about being on the German Village Commission. Ann?
One of the things that came to mind was a rather important situation. As we all know, Frank Fetch and our founding fathers decided that this was a residential community and that the businesses would be spread out through the village as they had always been. And sometimes that presented interesting challenges to the commission. And one of the biggest ones came in the mid-70s when the Franklin County Courthouse, the Hall of Justice, the new one and the expansion, moved across the street and opened. And what we discovered and found at that point was that people wanted to purchase residents on the north end of 3rd Street and turn them into offices. And of course, we wanted to keep residential structures as residential structures, and commercial ones certainly could be commercial. So when they would come to the commission, we would not approve or recommend approval of the variance. Then we found that people were buying them anyway, saying they lived in them, using the address for their home address and their voting address, and called it a home occupation. So this was not setting very well with any of us, and somebody then along the way, and I have no idea who that was, decided that maybe they should rezone 3rd Street from Livingston, I think it was to Frankfurt. Well, actually it would be from Blinkner to Frankfurt, because Livingston to Blinkner is already commercial, but they should rezone that to be commercial.
And Frankfurt would take you down to where Max and Irma's is that?
Yeah, I think so, right, okay. Yes it would. It may have not been quite that far, it may have been a little bit north of that, I don't really remember. But again, the commission did not recommend approval, so it went to city council, and the village was up in arms. We filled council chambers in opposition to the rezoning. And so this was, I think, a real turning point in a lot of things. I think it was started, may have been part of the impetus for the Heritage America, that symposium that we did in '86, I think it was, because trying to see what other communities, historic preservation communities, were doing about the residential-commercial balance. Now that sounds familiar still today. We're still talking about the balance. So they were interesting times.
And how did the zoning hearing come out in front of City Council?
They denied it. They denied the rezoning, which delighted all of us, of course. And thinking about that, then I remembered that we used to have a city council person on the German Village Commission. The one that is now the designee for council, I think is the way it's listed, used to be a city council person. We had Dan Schettinger, John Maloney, Cindy Cecil Lazarus, and Dorothy Teeter, and maybe one more, I'm not sure. We used to have a chair that was designated for German Village in the city council on the floor in the chambers. And we pretty much had that filled every Monday night, either with a commission person or a society person. So communication with the city was, of course, different, but all communication's different today, so, yeah. But those are the things, I mean, I just felt that it was such an important event, and I don't know whether anybody else has mentioned it or not. I'm sure that people have talked about the Heritage America Symposium.
I wonder if you could talk about that for a minute.
This was... we invited, if you'll have, Connie Swain's a better one for this one. Connie was the chair of this, and there was a whole committee, and we invited a group of all the historic preservation areas we could think of were invited. We had 3 consultants, historic preservation consultants. They came in and evaluated, looked at our situation, felt we were ahead of the curve. But the recommendations that they made to us were 3. One was that we should do a written guidelines book, which we did. 2, we should hire a historic preservation officer, which we did. And 3, we should get out and walk and enjoy the village, enjoy our neighbors and our neighborhood.
And I remember that you said before that you were instrumental in creating many of the guidelines.
Yes, right. Connie, again, was the chair of that, and Nancy Ritchie and Jeff Darby and Judy Williams did much of the did all of the writing, actually. But yeah, they were interesting times. Yeah, right. Yeah. When I served on the commission, we had no written guidelines, no historic preservation officer from the society. I think there was one person downtown that helped us, but we survived.
That's because you were probably walking around the streets having fun.
I was walking around the streets a lot and driving around the streets a lot looking to see what was happening and what was on the agenda. We didn't have the pre-meetings and the pictures and the... But they were wonderful times, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have fond memories of that.
Oh, very fond memories. We had fun, we enjoyed each other, we fought and disagreed, but all left friends.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So are there any other stories that you wanted to add?
Oh, dear. No, you'll have to wait until I go home and then I'll think of another one.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you bringing that back up so that we could learn about the rezoning efforts of 3rd Street and how you marched on City Hall, essentially, and were able to stop that.
And I bet, John, if you would go back to the City Council archives, it was all either videoed or filmed because I would see it on whatever channel it was afterwards. So much of that probably is there.
That would be fun. It would be fun to look at.
Yeah.
You know, along with that, the effort to keep law offices out of German Village, at least to a large extent.
Right.
There was the whole parking issue too, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it was not, and also not all the clients that were coming to those offices were exactly the most desirable clients, being as how they were coming right from the juvenile detention and so forth. And parking was a real problem, sure. But no, it was, and if you go down 3rd and you see those law offices, somewhere along the line they got grandfathered in, even though they really had never gotten an approval for a variance. But I don't know how they did it. It was after my time, but they are legal now.
So yeah, what happened to the residences that were in name only a residence and primarily an office? What happened in those situations?
They pretty much left them. They are now. Some of those that you see are the very ones that were saying they were home occupations. And home occupation, you know, that's, if they really lived there, that's one thing. But law offices, there's nobody there at night, there's nobody there on the weekend, the parking problem that John points out, the clientele. We didn't feel it was desirable. But I think one of the things that was most impressive was the outpouring of community support of maintaining 3rd Street as a residential street. We had other outpourings, I'm sure, but that's the one that I remember the most anyway. We went to city council a lot.